Ayikho into okungathiwa ayikahle kwezomlando ngale kokubheka isimo seqiniso, kepha konke kuphazanyiswa izigigaba zabacwaningi. Isizwe sikaZulu sichazwe ngezindlela eziningi ezahlukene ngokweso lwezinye izizwe kwezomlando. Lena indaba eqondene nokusimama kwesizwe sakwaZulu kanye nokuwa kombuso waso ngokweso lamaZulu.
As empires go, it did not last long, less than half a century. It wasn't all that large, perhaps 35,000 square miles at its zenith. But as for military prowess, for strategy and tactics, discipline and determination, the empire under Shaka, king of the Zulu, and for several generations after him, was unequaled on the African continent.
Awuhlukane nesibindi sakho ukhiphe izinkomo esibayeni.
In Zululand, a man is measured by the number of cattle he owns. It has been like that since the beginning of time, since even before King Shaka, when our people were scattered over the land in small groups. I am Mandla, and I have the blood of Shaka in my veins. In my land, we have great respect for our ancestors. If we respect them, then they, in turn, will help and guide us. I am doubly blessed, for not only is the great King Shaka among my ancestors, but also I live in the most sacred part of Zululand. We call this place E-Makhosini, the Valley of the Kings, for it is here that Zulu himself and 7 other kings lie buried. I have been asked by my father to bring this goat to our sangomas as a sacrifice to make our ancestors happy. The Zulu religion, practiced for centuries, is based upon ancestor worship. After death, an ancestor's shadow or personality, called Isintunzi, guards and guides his descendants, provided they, in turn, make appropriate and regular sacrifices.
Behamba ngokufaneleyo, benza neminikelo zikhathi zonke, eminyakeni eminingi.
King Dechwayo made an observation. He said, "First came the white trader, who took our ivory and gave us beads. Then came the missionaries, who gave us their religion and tried to take away our beliefs. Then came their soldiers, the redcoats, who gave us their laws and took away our land. And in all this giving and taking, it was the takers who received more than the givers. Don't you think?"
Amadlozi alindele manje, make ngimkhombe.
The ancestors are now ready, so let me show you a time before the white man, before the swallows, as Shaka called them, because they built their homes from mud instead of grass like we do.
Isizwe sabenguni, isizwe sakwaZulu.
The Nguni peoples from whom the Zulu spring lived here for over 2,000 years. It was a time of much strife, with small tribes or clans each trying to outdo the other. It was Malandela, born in 1560, who was the father of the Zulu nation. But it was his son, Zulu, who gave us our name, which means people of heaven. More than 150 years were to pass before Senzanga Kona was born. He fathered 10 sons, but it is 3 which will interest you. The youngest of the 3 was Mpande. The second was Dingaan. And the third, Shaka. King Shaka, the empire builder, murdered by his half-brother Dingaan, who usurped the throne and ruled for little more than a decade before he too was assassinated. Then came Mpande, who tried to hold onto what was left, but the swallows kept arriving in great numbers, and what they wanted was what was left. So if you wish to understand the Zulu, you must start with King Shaka. For he was the man who built a clan into a nation, and then a nation into an empire. By today's measure, he was a cruel and ruthless man. But you must remember that those far-off days were cruel and ruthless times. To survive, you had to be hard. And there is no better way for making a hard man than to give him a troubled childhood and a mother scorned. Shaka was born out of wedlock, refused recognition of his royal blood, rejected by his tribe and made to feel unwelcome in his mother's family, constantly taunted by his peers.
Ngesikhathi esethombile uShaka, ebusheni bakhe wayese nazo zonke izibazi zokuhlukumezeka ezamenza abe yindoda elukhulu.
By the time of puberty, the young Shaka had all the psychological scars necessary to make for a man driven. And his determination to forge the Zulu people into a nation was underpinned by a simple ambition. Incorporate those peoples who were willing. Subjugate those who weren't.
Ngusibisi lona.
This is Petrus Sibisi, my brother. He is the best stick fighter in the valley. He too has the blood of King Shaka in him. And King Shaka was the best stick fighter that ever lived.
uShaka wayebusiswe ngokuba nemibono esabalele futhi
Shaka was blessed with a far-sighted mentor, King Dingiswayo, who introduced him to the age regiment system. And this formed the foundation upon which he built his military philosophies. His physical prowess became legendary, his fighting skills feared. He could hit a small tuft of grass with a hunting spear hurled from 40 paces. As a youngster, he liked nothing more than mass stick fights. He drilled his teams into tightly disciplined formations who invariably thrashed all comers. Word of this unusual man began to spread amongst the hills of Zululand.
Kodwa uShaka wayenamabutho akhe.
But Shaka kept his own counsels. His mother, upon whom he doted, was his only friend. He was a loner, a thinker, a young man with a vision and the intellect to make it reality.
uShaka wayazi ukuthi kwakufanele athole amaqhinga amasha ukuba.
He had to develop new methods of fighting. The received wisdom of doing battle was ineffectual. It was all show and little substance. He wanted more commitment, more contact, more decisive outcomes. In short, more efficient killing techniques.
uShaka wayefuna kwenziwe ihawu elifushane.
First a stronger, shorter, more maneuverable shield. Then a short-shafted, long, broad-bladed spear designed for close combat. The trick was to hook your shorter shield inside that of your opponent's longer one and, pulling it aside, reveal his naked, unarmed flank. Withdrawing half a yard of cold steel from a man's chest makes a strange, sucking noise.
Ngakho bakubiza ngokuthi yihlwa.
So they called it that, the Iklwa. Shaka's new technique was to prove spectacularly successful. He named it Impi Ibomvu, which literally means the Red Regiment. It also means total war. But before you could dispatch your victim, you first had to trap him. And this was where Shaka revolutionized local warfare. Izimpondo Zenyati, or the horns of the buffalo, was the battle formation which called for a frontal assault from the center, or boss of the horns, using older, battle-hardened warriors, combined with an outflanking maneuver from either side to encircle the enemy with the horns, using fleet-footed youngsters, the whole formation backed by a reserve from the older age regiments. The combination of close-quarter fighting and the deadly embrace of Isimpondo Zenyati proved catastrophic for many a bewildered warrior, and King Shaka's reputation grew apace. So did his power. Shaka was not slow at seizing political opportunity. His father died in 1816, having chosen a legitimate and favorite son to succeed him. Shaka would have none of it, and with the active support of King Dingiswayo, his mentor, swept aside all opposition to become the Nkosi, or king of the Zulu people. He was not quite 30 years old. He would only rule for 12 years, but in that time, he took the Zulu people by the scruff of the neck and forged them into the Zulu Empire, stretching from Mozambique in the north to the high Drakensberg Mountains, the Okahlamba in the west, and south as far as the Eastern Cape border. To succeed, he had to fight a series of increasingly momentous battles. In order to head off a threat to his power from Prince Bakuza, he first took on the large and influential Buthelezi people, who regarded him as an illegitimate upstart and usurper to boot. When they had been subjected to the Isimpondo Zinyati and counted their losses, they decided otherwise, and King Shaka moved on, his army growing in discipline, experience, and numbers by the day as he absorbed the vanquished into his ranks and drilled them mercilessly in the manner of the new Zulu fighting techniques and formations. The regiments were forced to travel barefoot to make them swifter. They were subjected to enormous route marches, jogging many, many miles. Anyone who could not keep up was dispatched to his ancestors with a swift spear thrust from special slayers who followed behind. Discipline was iron hard. So were the regiments. The Battle of Kwagokli Hill against the Ndwandwe, where 5,000 perished, had the hallmark of brilliance. Outnumbered nearly 2 to 1, King Shaka had prepared the ground carefully. He cleared the area for miles around of all food and drink, but ensured his own men were generously supplied. Then, in a series of feints and counterattacks, he slowly wore the Ndwandwe army down.
Ekuhlaseleni izikhathi eziningi, amabutho akhe wayewagqokise imifaniswano efana neyabakwaNdwandwe.
When they had become thoroughly demoralized and hungry, he unleashed a hidden force which tore the guts out of the invaders, sending the remnants homewards with gruesome tales about this fearful new fighting machine. Zwide, their king, was a rapid learner, and copying the new Zulu fighting techniques, he returned to seek revenge. But once again, King Shaka's generalship prevailed. Drawing the Ndwandwe army deeper and deeper into Zulu territory, he finally attacked and routed them in the dark recesses of the almost impenetrable Nkandla forests. Impenetrable, that is, if you were not familiar with the territory. King Shaka had that perfect of all combinations. He would first choose and prepare the terrain, then deliver an unpredictable, brilliantly clever battle plan which simply outwitted his opponents. The techniques remained constant. The strategies were tailored to the occasion. His generalship and his innate understanding of human psychology had the mark of genius. Across the hills and valleys of this most beautiful land, there were two sounds feared above all others. The deep-throated, drawn-out battle cry of the Zulu regiments. And moments later, as the warriors hurled themselves at the foe, lunging with their stabbing spears at exposed bodies. I have eaten.
kodwa futhi nangaphakathi wayenazo kakhulukazi kwakuyizanusi zakhe ayethembele kuzona naye owaphetha ngokuthi ayibize ukuthi zizoshaya umhlahlo kwathi ngokwehlule
Shaka had quite simply become too powerful. And then when his mother died, his mourning and grief nearly destroyed the Zulu nation. To use his dead mother's name meant instant execution. He stopped people from eating, he destroyed the crops, he burnt the cattle. His grief made him lose his mind. And nobody could stop him. He was all-powerful. Many, many innocent people died. It was his aunt, Nkabai Kajama, who decided it was too much. He was destroying the very nation he had built. She encouraged his half-brothers Dingaan and Mhlangana and the trusted bodyguard Mbopa to assassinate him when he sat alone late one afternoon. The nation had had enough grieving, and it took a woman to bring down the greatest king the Zulu ever had, to bring the nation back to its senses. In the late afternoon of the 24th of September 1828, in the eerie peace which followed a summer storm, and while King Shaka's army was campaigning in the north, the three men crept up on him as he sat alone on a rock surveying his cattle, and thrust their short stabbing spears into their king. As he lay dying, he called out, "You will never rule, for the whole land will be white with the light of the stars, and it will be overrun with swallows." The three assassins fled the scene, leaving King Shaka's corpse where it lay, in the hope that overnight hyenas would eat the evidence. Without proper burial rites, his spirit wandered lost through the night. The ancestors were mightily troubled by this lack of proper ceremony. The next morning, the corpse lay untouched, although the spoor of hyena lay all about it. In death, as in life, he exerted extraordinary power. In his dying words, he made a prophecy and a curse, and they would both come to pass. The Zulu Empire was damned by Shaka and cursed by the swallows.
Ekuqale abantu bakwaZulu bakuthokozela ngamathemba okubuswa inkosi yabo entsha inkosi uDingane. Ngaphandle kokubulala umfowabo Buthule, wayebonakala eyindoda enokuthula okuthe cosololo. Inkosi uDingane
At first, the Zulu people rejoiced at the prospect of Dingaan, their new king. For, apart from quietly killing off his half-brother, he seemed a man bent upon peace and tranquility. He relaxed the rules in the army. He relaxed its discipline. He released thousands of warriors from full-time military service and encouraged them to marry much younger than King Shaka would have allowed. And in so doing, he began to sow the seeds of his own destruction and that of the empire. However, the cries of "Bayati, hail your majesty," were many and loud, as were the praise songs which glorified the new leader, while damning the previous one in words which would have been unthinkable a few months earlier. Hairy one, with hair like a lion's, having hair even on his legs. Quiet one, he speaks not, he is mouthless. He is unlike Shaka, who finished off a household by chattering.
Mandla ngizakukhombisa la isigodlo senkosi uCetshwayo uCetshwayo wazakhela sona sabanzi sabheka ezansi le kuyizindlu zakhe zonke lezi kukhuphuka kuyale phezulu wase kuthi yena wenza into ehlukile wazakhela indlu yakhe nansi kwakuyona yinkulu la.
He moved his headquarters away from the troublesome traders of Port Natal, back here to the E-Makhosini Valley, where he built an immense and grand capital, a mile in diameter, with nearly 2,000 dwellings surrounding a vast parade ground. But still the swallows followed him. They came over the Okahlamba, the Drakensberg Mountains, in the form of the Boers led by Piet Retief. The Boers pestered him for land, the British pestered him for trading rights, and the missionaries simply pestered him. All the while, the great elephant, as he was called, was repeatedly warned by his interpreter, Nhlabamanzi, of the duplicity of the swallows. Never trust them, for they want to take everything you have.
Bese kuthi lesi isibaya sikaCetshwayo isibaya senkosi lesi udingayo kwakunenkomo ezimhlophe la eziningi ezayigcwala la kunomfulo odlula lapha phambi komuzi wakhe uze uyoshona lapha uye lapha kule yandlanyana ephesheya.
He tried to set up diplomatic ties with Britain and sent a delegation to the Cape. The British snubbed him. He tried to control the growing population of British traders camping on his soil at Port Natal, but they found ways of disobeying him. The swallows were flying in his face.
But besahlela amabhunu sejabulela ukuthi asezophuma wayeseyishintsha lento wathi babulalela. Ekuqaleni kukaFebruary ka1838 uPiet Retief ethemba ukuthi wayezosayina isivumelwano somhlaba.
At the beginning of February 1838, Piet Retief, hoping to sign a land agreement, returned with 66 Boer volunteers and about 30 black grooms and a divine right from his god to again pester King Dingaan for land. Having recovered some stolen cattle for the king, Retief felt he had discharged his side of the bargain. While there was no doubt he was a charismatic leader in the eyes of his own people, he was seen to be arrogant and condescending to the Zulu.
Kodwa wayebukwa ngabantu bakwaZulu njengomuntu onenkani nozithobayo kubantu bakwaZulu.
He had already told the traders at Port Natal that it took a Boer, not an Englishman, to understand a Kaffir. His behavior to Dingaan was also nothing short of rude and threatening. The Boers also wanted quite a lot of land, half the Zulu Empire to be precise, from a society in which the concept of freehold property ownership simply did not exist. Land belonged to the nation. It could not be given to anyone, let alone strangers. To cap it all, he severely breached Zulu etiquette on 2 counts. First of all, he ordered his horsemen to show their fighting mettle. the Zulu did not appreciate shows of strength by aliens in their own land.
Okwakufike kubacike kakhulu abakwaZulu ngokwehlulwa ngumthetho wenhlonipho ngumnomzana uPieter izikhathi ezimbili. Okokuqala watshela amabhunu ayehamba nawo ngamahashi ukuthi ake akhombisa abakwaZulu ukuthi alwa kanjani. AbakwaZulu abakuthandanga ukutshelwa izihambi amandla azo kulwa endaweni yabo. Okwesibili kwatholwa amabhunu amanye ezungeze endaweni yenkosi kusuku.
Furthermore, some of the Boers were caught wandering around outside at night, and this was the stuff of wizards. Dingaan decided upon a course of action. He would rid himself of this unpleasant man and his party, who had been found prowling around the royal residence only the night before, and then kill off the rest of the Boers who had invaded his territory from the north. The unsuspecting Boers did not stand a chance when King Dingaan cried out, "Kill the wizards!" They kept Retief for last, forcing him to watch his son being executed, before gouging out his eyes, heart and liver. The great elephant then let his army loose with instructions to kill off all the Boer land invaders, to stop once and for all the pestering swallows. The Boers saw themselves as settlers. The Zulu saw them as invaders. At first, the Boers were unprepared for the Zulu onslaught, and many men, women, and children lost their lives. But the Zulu king had made a bad political miscalculation, for which the Zulu nation paid heavily here at Blood River, where the victorious Boers built this monumental laager of bronze wagons. For both sides, the events of this period were to echo bitterly down the years. And so, in spite of a still formidable Zulu army, the Swallows were here to stay, and King Shaka's empire was in dire jeopardy. Not only had King Dingaan suffered a crushing defeat, but he knew the Boers would not leave him alone. They would press home their advantage to seek further revenge, and, of course, more land. He torched his capital in the E-Makhosini valley and fled north. To make matters worse, his half-brother, Mpande, with 17,000 followers, sought sanctuary with the Boers. It was the beginning of the end. The elephant has swallowed. You are the quiet one, O heavens above. You are the quiet one, O lion. You are the quiet one, O leopard. You are the quiet one, O great elephant. In March 1840, just 6 years after the first Boers came to inspect Zululand as a potential new home, Dingaan, the king of the once mighty Zulu Empire, was assassinated in the night by the Nyao people. In just 2 decades, the great Zulu Empire was both created and reduced to a state of civil war. It became easy pickings for the Swallows. It now fell to Mpande to hold the nation together.
Umpande owayenobuqili sekusele yena.
Mpande, a shrewd survivor, was the ideal king to bring some semblance of peace back to the ravaged, war-torn country. The empire might have shriveled, but the nation was still strong. It had strong customs and traditions, it had strong laws and rules, and it had strong Induna to implement them. Above all, it had strong people who knew that to be a Zulu was the proudest thing anybody in the world could wish for.
Ukuba ngowakwaZulu, ukukhuliswa kwaZulu, ukwazi amasiko akho, wafundiswa ngabadala. Lokho ikhono kwakubalulekile. Ukuba ngowasendaweni yasemakhosini.
To have the E-Makhosini Valley, to have Zululand, to be a Zulu, that was what mattered. To watch over your cattle and see them grow fat and strong. To have 300 separate words in your language to describe their different markings and colors. To celebrate weddings and births. To drink beer and make your ancestors happy with the sacrifice of a fine cow. To grieve together in death and to observe all the proper rituals so as to send the spirits properly on their way. These, after all, were the important things. This is what made you a Zulu. To dance and sing, to listen to the old men tell tales of the glorious battles of the past, to admire the fine beadwork of a young woman who is sending a secret love signal to her admirer. This is what it meant to be a Zulu. To handle your fighting sticks like a man, and to know that when your regiment calls you, you will join a group of friends, all of whom would gladly lay down their lives for the honor of the nation. This is a Zulu. Nothing else matters. Mpande managed to patch up a peace of sorts with the British and the Boers, but the cost in terms of his true independence was high. Bit by bit, over the 32 years that he ruled, the Swallows became more and more powerful. The old order was changing when his strong-willed son, Lechwayo, forced himself into the ascendancy at the cost of yet another bloody civil war. But he was at least recognized by the Zulu people as the rightful king. Lechwayo, however, had not counted on the British colonial mindset. Within a few short years, the British engineered a situation where they confronted the Zulu with an ultimatum. It was outrageous in both its deadline and its demands.
There's bound to be war.
Imagine the following, if you can.
It'll be over in a matter of weeks, mark my words.
The Zulu set up a small trading station in Aberystwyth on the Welsh coast. The Boers, by the way, have settled in Northern Ireland, which serves them right, while the Zulu inexorably take over all of Scotland and Wales. They then issue an ultimatum to the British Parliament in which they demand that a Zulu political commissar, called a resident, will sit in judgment over Westminster. The British Army is forced to disband.
Order!
Zulu law is imposed over the British Isles, and Queen Victoria cannot issue any communication without first having it endorsed by the Zulu resident. Preposterous? Certainly, but no more outrageous than the British ultimatum in the eyes of the Zulu. They were asking for the entire Zulu social structure to dismantle itself and kowtow to Britain.
Frank, more champagne.
The ultimatum called for the disbanding of the Zulu army, the banning of the age regimen system upon which the entire fabric of Zulu society was based, the appointment of a political commissar who would dictate all their foreign affairs, and the imposition of an entirely alien set of laws at the stroke of a pen. Of course it was outrageous. The British realized that too, but they wanted war. They were the greatest military nation on earth. They were the greatest empire ever seen.
Order! It'll be over in a matter of weeks, mark my words.
The Zulus, they assumed, would put up a little resistance but soon crumble. That was the colonial mind for you. They had not counted on the Zulu warrior. O brave ancestors whose spirits dwell in this great battleground of Isandlwana, I bring you my young brother, Mandla, to see this place, and to pass on the story of all the brave warriors who fought the enemy here on this day, many, many years ago, defeating them completely and sending a handful of redcoats running for their lives back into Natal.
Lapha-ke manje mfana kithi ngizokutshengisa ukuthi uZulu walwa kanjani kule nkundla. benza lo buyabuchule benkosi uShaka okwakuthiwa izimpondo zenyathi. Ngizothatha nazo ezami izimpondo namhlanje ngikutshengise. Lezi impondo ezenkomo kodwa zimi kahle zinabo lo buyabuchule. Lapha ngizokukhombisa lapha kwakuyikhaya.
I wish to tell him of all the famous regiments, of how you gathered upon the hilltops and deploying Izimpondo Zinyati, the horns of the buffalo, you encircled the enemy and poured down upon them, and when you faltered under the withering fire, Mkhosana Biela, one of our generals, stood and cried out, "You did not come here to lie down. Why are you lying down?" And as he was shot, our warriors rose as one man and ran into the bullets and overwhelmed the British.
Hey, ungalali phansi awushongo njalo okandaba uthi olala akamdukula mangisi waye walala phansi kodwa wavuka lapho abambezana usutu usutu
Sengidlile.
Madla mfana kithi lamangcwabo wabona lapha amangcwaba laba bamhlopha balwa kule nkundla amangcwaba lana aphethe abantu nga5 ngaphansi ngoba emaningi singekho nesikhathi sokubangcwaba laba bakithi kwaZulu abafa kule nkundla kumele sibahloniphe sibazise balo belela izwe likaZulu ukuze nathi silithole kuze kufike lesikhathi nathi kumele silibambe libe nje balinjalo asambe mandla mfana kithi